Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Well, you guys just ate, so you have to have a little bit of energy, right? Don't fall asleep in my presentation. People will talk. And they'll take pictures and post it on social media. You know they will. Anywho, well, for those of you who don't know me yet, I am Deputy Secretary Alicia Andrews, and I'm the Deputy Secretary for the Commonwealth for Homeland Security. And many of you might be asking a question of, why is there a Homeland Security Deputy Secretary for a state-level position? Well, it kind of goes back a little bit further than me, but my perception is on January 15th of 2022, Governor Youngkin came into office at 12 o'clock. Part of what his initial push was for 5 different pillars. For our case right now, those other four pillars aren't necessarily as important for what we're doing today, okay? So they're important. Don't quote me that they're not. They're definitely very important. But one of the ones that meant the most to me was cyber, and talking about how we can improve the Commonwealth cyber posture. And the governor and I have been around each other for quite some time. If you know anything about history, we've been around each other quite a bit. And why that's important is I've spent my career in the intelligence community, both with cyber and not with cyber, to talk about various ways that both the Commonwealth and the country can be impacted. And that's super important to us today, right? When you think about cyber and you think about where all the funding, where everything goes to, you don't realize exactly how many people are involved and why it matters. So I want to talk to you guys today a little bit about cybersecurity, the Commonwealth, and you. And while that might sound kind of quaint, it isn't. Because the more that I've learned in this position is how valuable every constituent is. And not just the ones here in the Commonwealth, but those that surround us. Because as you know, we're all connected, one network to the other. And while yours might be the best in class, we learned from Target several years ago, you might have the great point of sale system that can block out lots of things, but if your air conditioning man is not secure, neither are you. And it puts a lot of perspective when you paint that picture of the value of every individual when we talk about cyber, when we bring cyber to the forefront and make it human. You know, most people think it's a ones and zeros game. They don't realize exactly what all touches cyber. Well, here in the Commonwealth, everything, in my humble opinion, I can find an access to literally anything to make cyber touch it. And I challenge anyone to try to out-cyber the Commonwealth over me. But from everything from farming and our agricultural space, we're really trying to make headway to help our farmers be more aggressive in their delivery and help with their soil, to encourage family farms to continue. To the medical space in Central Virginia, where we look at medical devices and the role that they play and what it looks like for the protection of those devices. Down to Wapples Island, where we're specifically talking about space and how Virginia has aggressively entered the space program, where we are now sending a sortie to space once a month at minimum. How many of you didn't know that we actually have a pretty active space program? It's okay. Some people are raising their hand. It's not embarrassing. You can raise your hand. I won't judge you. But we do, and that's happened over the past couple of years. And it's incredible to watch. Now, if you go up to Northern Virginia, where you have over 80% of the world's fiber, you realize how important cyber is and why Virginia holds such an incredible linchpin in the Homeland Security program. And everything has a nexus. And that's what makes what I do, and what I'm going to explain to you about all the people that are involved do, really convey a pretty convincing and I think pretty powerful story. If only I can use the clicker well. All right, so cyber in the news. Some of these things that you're going to see here, news stories, have taken place over the past little bit.
Will this presentation be available afterwards?
I believe so. I think so. Will it? Yes? Yes. They're shaking their head in the back, so yes. So one of the most important things, you can look at multiple things that have happened in the Commonwealth before my time, currently during my time. Whether it's been hospitals that have been impacted, 911 systems that have impacted, colleges that have been impacted. Cyber is an equal opportunity crime. And that's why we are looking to find new ways to not only work together, but to challenge the narrative that it's only for the ones and zeros, and I've heard some pretty offensive things in my time, but basically just dweebs, right? It's not just us, it's everyone. And so as you look at this up here, I mean, you can see anything from the Norfolk Airport Authority faced the security brief, and that was through email scheming. UVA, all their financial data. For those of you who remember Fairfax being impacted during the pandemic when their students were held under ransomware for their academic records and all of their PII. Needless to say, there isn't a place in the Commonwealth where this doesn't have an impact. Now, a lot of our crime data, right? This should be no mystery to any of you exactly what some of this data conveys. So this is FBI's data specifically on the United States. And what's happened over the past several years in the top 5 types of cybercrimes. Tech support, that should be no surprise to anyone in this room. Extortion, non-payment, non-delivery, phishing, and personal data breaches. Does anything up there surprise anyone in this room? Not me neither. But I kind of was a little bit surprised. That surprised you? Yeah, that was a pretty big one. But I thought phishing was going to be a much higher number than it was. But then when I called and talked to them, they conveyed, well, not everybody reports it, right? Which is a problem we have in the Commonwealth. And I'll get to that a little bit later. But we only know a small segment of people that actually report. And so if they're not reporting their data, we can assume that is probably 20 to 30% of the actual numbers. If I were gambling, that would be where I would put it. And I think that that's something that we can safely say, while these are the most significant ones that we've seen so far, they're far from the last ones. Oop, I went too far, sorry about that. So some more of these cyber stats that I think you guys would find interesting, because you're probably into trying to understand why people are the way that they are and what the impact is. Now I want to draw your attention to a couple outliers here. So one, phishing, right? You guys all figured that was probably going to be up there. But if you look over to what we actually lost, and that's on the right-hand side of the screen. Again, this is FBI data. Phishing only took $52 million. If you believe that that's only the amount of money that phishing has taken out of our country, I've got oceanfront property for you in the middle of Kansas. It is just not logical, but that's what's captured. So we have such a small segment. But one of the things that we've realized a lot, and I've done a lot of traveling throughout the Commonwealth, is that some of the most vulnerable people, our senior citizens, are some of the most impacted when it comes to cybercrime. And you're probably thinking, Alicia, what do you mean? Look at the numbers for the romance and it says something else on there too. There you go, and confidence. Look how much they took out of that, $735 million. I don't know how your grandparents are, but my grandmother would click on anything that offered her a $5 gift card somewhere, which is why we have a very strong security program that keeps her the heck away from all of our stuff. But that's how they get into these older folks that truly don't believe that those nefarious actors are out there. And the romance schemes specifically target those that are incredibly vulnerable, that don't think if they continue to send this money to this person who's provided a picture, but they won't do a Facebook Live, or they won't, FaceTime them, or they won't talk to them on the phone for any length of time or come visit them, that's not a problem. But if that's only 20% or 25% of what has potentially been captured, of $735 million, think about that. And that's the vulnerable. And it's just a pretty impactful thing on what we're looking at in the education process. These are some of my favorites. I doubt you'll be too shocked, outside of the fact there's only been 11,000 people, almost 12, that have reported as victims of cybercrime. I think that number has to be astronomically low, but again, most people don't realize who to report to, or who to share, or who to find out, who to talk to in the case of something like that happening. Now this comes into the state of Virginia. I'm a huge train fan, so I'm always constantly telling people I can't wait for you to meet Virginia. Well, I can't wait for you to meet Cyber Team Virginia. So what most people have deduced is that there's 1 or 2 people that run the cyber program for the Commonwealth. It's just not factual. It's a giant team sport. And I'm going to walk you through a couple of the agencies and the value that they specifically bring to the table. But it's important that you know that each one of the executive branch agencies have CIOs or CISOs that run their cyber program. On top of that, we have the state police, who have two different veins in which they approach, both from the Fusion Center as a collection entity to be able to see what's happening where and try to draw those correlations out, but also specifically the High-Tech Crimes Division, where they're actually investigating these crimes. And while the law has not completely caught up with cybercrime, they're doing the best that they can in working with federal prosecutors. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with RVAsec. If you're not familiar with the elections version of it, please do so. We work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Richmond office, to understand some of the crimes that they're looking at and things that they're able to process if it's interstate to state or if it's an international driven crime. We do have something special that most people don't realize is we have the wonderful Virginia National Guard. And they're not your 2 weeks a year, every other weekend kind of crew. Many of them work full time, which is incredibly powerful because the governor has the ability in a state of emergency to activate the National Guard, our Cyber National Guard, to be able to come sit left seat, right seat in the event that we need them to, which many of the other states don't have that capacity and would have to ask for assistance to be able to move those personnel out. We work with DHS, INA, and CISA. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with both entities. If you're not, that's going to be a fun ride. We have Virginia's IT agency, and throughout my talks around the Commonwealth, people believe, constituents believe, that VITA runs everything. They don't. They run the Commonwealth of Virginia network and the executive branch for the Commonwealth. Outside of that, there's different entities that run those particular networks. So when you see something happening, whether it be at the General Assembly or if you see something happening at the AG's office or other places, that's not necessarily VITA. VITA always will offer to help, but their area of responsibility of the AOR is specifically the COV network. And last but certainly not least is the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, VITM. VITM offers a unique space as we continue to look at infrastructure and how infrastructure can be impacted. So as a whole, we're a pretty large team, and this doesn't include everybody. VDOT's played a huge role with OT in the delivery of what we're looking for in the future. I'm sure if I did a poll, many of you saw what happened in India with the train that derailed, and they believe that it was a cybersecurity incident. Anybody? A couple heads? I think so. So when we were looking at that, we had already done a tabletop last year where we were working together to truly drive what can we do in the event of something like this happening. Because with the Metro, the VRE, every bus known to man running up and down the 95-81 corridor, as well as the ferry in operation down in the southeastern corridor and everything in between, it's an issue. You know, we can protect against it, but it has to be something that we work in tandem with everyone else. There we go. All right, so VITA. So VITA has the CIO, Robert Osman. If you haven't met Bob yet, I still call him the new guy, even though he's been there about 8 months. But he's brought a lot of change to the Commonwealth, specifically looking at new ways to get to yes. Things that have previously taken us 18 months, 2 years, and longer are no longer taking that length of time because of the silos that we've been eliminating. Trying to ensure that OTS products are able to get from start to finish as quick as possible, within reason, obviously to meet security concerns. But some of the directorates that are in there are risk, governance, threat, architecture, ISO, and audit. And why that's important, because they're able to offer those services, but they don't force them down anyone's throat. So if the CIO of an agency needs it, they have those resources available. But it has to be a team collective. All right, the Fusion Center. So they have what is the cyber intelligence team. And I'm going to go a little bit into later about the specific legislation that was enacted this past July on what has empowered the Fusion Center specifically to be able to do what they're doing. But what right now is they collect all intake of public entities reporting a cyber incident within the first 24 hours of incident. And you might be asking yourself, well, in the first 24 hours, there's not a whole heck of a lot you know. But it's really not meant for that. It's meant for us to be able to say, something's happening in Lee County, something's happening in Loudoun County, something's happening in Virginia Beach. To be able to have people raise their hands and say, we think we have an issue. And while we've done a significant deep dive into cybercrime in the Commonwealth, some of which has been participated in by outside of the country. And because of that, when you're targeting 911 systems, you're targeting schools. Just recently, we had a school that was targeted on some of their security infrastructure for the school. While that's important, but if it happened in more than one place, we want to know as quickly as possible, because as you know, bad news does not travel faster if you're quiet. It just makes everything worse. So it's one of the things we've worked on diligently. So high-tech crimes gets to do all the really fun stuff. If you like to have your hands-on experience high-tech crimes, is where it's at. So the state police have employed the coolest people on the planet that just geek out on any cyber incident that they can get involved with to be able to assist. Because it's almost like a crime scene, where you're there to actually preserve the evidence, go through and understand the crime, understand the behavioralisms that came to the crime, and it's really powerful to see some of the work that they've done. But they work in tandem with the FBI. So as things get a little bit too big, the FBI is able to come in and utilize their resources to help as well. But one thing that they're able to do that others aren't is to make recommendations. Recommendations, whether it is what they can do specifically to their network, or even if it means recommendations for prosecution. Is anybody in here familiar with the SHIELD program? Oh, all one of you. That is not comforting. All right, so the SHIELD program is something that the state police have created, where it's essentially a product that goes out any time that there is a cyber incident, an incident that might be anti-Semitic or others, a religious incident, or what have you. There's a various number of SHIELD products. But specifically, you can log in and it's sent to you, and it brings along all of the information that goes with it in tandem, so you can understand exactly what happened and find resources to be able to learn more if you so happen to choose to. All right. So this is our Cyber Annex. And most of you probably are asking yourself, what the heck is a Cyber Annex? Well, it's the first time in Virginia history where we actually have a plan. In the event of something major happening to the Commonwealth, these are the roles and responsibilities of people and how they act. So once something happens, we triage out to determine whether it goes to VITA, the state police, to VITA, or if it's something where we're just there to provide support. In the event that it affects the Commonwealth system, it goes to VITA, and we're there to provide any kind of supplemental information that they might need. If it goes to any other private industry or, I don't know, one of our local entities, then we would divvy out depending on the level of the crime on who it would go to, and then it routes all the way up to continue until the incident is fully resolved. So while we don't necessarily want to be in the weeds with everyone, if you need us, we're happily there as a team to provide as many resources as possible. Apparently I can only hit it over here. All right. Well, this is one of my favorite parts of my presentation. So public-private partnerships have been a game changer for us. When it comes to having over 60,000, and that's what Google's number is, not mine, 60,000 holes for cyber jobs in the Commonwealth. And when you think about it, the impact of having 60,000 job holes, what it has to the security of not only private industry in the state, in the locality, but at the federal level as well, because it all kind of balloons up. So we've been working diligently to try to find new ways to get to yes. Some of you might be familiar with the legislation, the decree that the governor just came with specifically to eliminate the degree requirement for Virginia state jobs. And the governor didn't do this because he doesn't value a degree, but what he did this for is because he values experience and understanding that if you are an entry-level student coming out of college trying to get a job, you don't always have 3 to 5 years of experience. And some people, like myself, came from a no-collar family where I was not a traditional learner. I didn't get my undergraduate degree till I was 23, and I got my MBA when I was 25. But Uncle Sam paid for that. My parents never could. And there's so many more just like me, especially in the Commonwealth. So there's so many ways to get to yes that we're working with private partnerships, whether it be Google that we just did some stuff with the past couple weeks ago, where we're specifically getting certificates at the associate's level to help people be empowered and lift up the entire community because they don't have to spend $100,000 that they don't have in order to get really great paying jobs. But in addition to that, we've created this whole cycle of developing our people. It starts from elementary school here in a very small way, where we start introducing cyber, mostly security protocols. Don't share your passwords, don't tell people your birthdays, keep your PII to yourself. We do that through various ways through the education system. Some things are poster challenges, and some things are just them learning from their local SRO. But it's important that we engage early on because these students start developing. In some of the schools in the Commonwealth, they do this thing called bot racing. If you've ever seen a kindergartner do bot racing, it is really intimidating as one of their mothers to watch how quick they pick up coding and how quick I did not pick it up. And they literally teach them coding for kids, and they start the bot at the classrooms, and they let the two classrooms compete and race it around the school. And it gives them the satisfaction, but also teaches them language when they're starting to actually fully develop their languages at early on. And it's pretty cool to watch. But then we move on to middle school, where we allow them to take computer sciences, and we really encourage that movement into the IT sector, whether it be cyber or computer science. And in this adventure, as I don't know how many of you have middle schoolers, but I do, and it's way cooler now to be a middle schooler than it was when I was.
It's missing from our curriculum where we live, and a lot of other people I've talked to, that type of curriculum is missing in a lot of places in Virginia.
That's part of why we're working towards creating that ability. Because I agree with you, it is missing in a lot of places, which is why it's been identified. A lot of it's private partnerships, and they've put things into the schools. But going into the middle school route, so what they've got with the different cyber programs and or computer science, it's specifically meant to help them create different environments and gamification to help them kind of grow a little bit further out. And it's a choice on if they want to take that or art or another element, and the ones that want to take it do. And then in high school, they can advance even further. But the problem is because it isn't available everywhere, like you mentioned, and whether it's curriculum-based or it's because we don't necessarily have the technology teachers everywhere that have the capacity to be able to do that, teach these specific skill sets, it allows us to do other partnerships with things like the cyber range. The cyber range at Virginia Tech, something that's open to all of the students in the Commonwealth. It's open to all the technology teachers in the Commonwealth. But what they went even further was to create a cyber range that would extend to where other states can operate, not the Virginia one, but there's a secondary piece, which has allowed educators across the country to be able to specifically engage at their level. Internship programs has been a passion of mine, because again, as I mentioned before, if you're entry level, it's hard to be able to say that you have 3 to 5 years of experience right out of the gate. So when I first took this role, I challenged across our Commonwealth to our county offices and places where they really are struggling with cyber, where they need people that are capable to start getting involved with some of these college students, getting involved with some of these seniors and juniors in high school to start helping them learn the trade, learn specifically from their local entities. And the reason why that was so powerful is because of that sweat equity piece. They care about their communities, they live there. They don't necessarily want to go work somewhere else for an internship. They want to actually learn through their trade. And so since I've been in this role, we've put multiple students, both in and out of the state, but specifically for the state, we've had them go down to the Port of Virginia and work, and they can work remotely, obviously. In addition to that, we've also had students help with our election systems, places where they didn't have the ability to meet the code that was recently presented 2 sessions ago. So we were able to introduce these students to a whole new world and answer the need that some of these localities had, which was pretty incredible. CyberSlam is something that started last year, and I had talked to a few of you before this session about the importance of CyberSlam. And what it does is several high school students from high school teachers from Northern Virginia recognized a need in the high school space to do hands-on training, to actually give these kids a field trip experience. And so what started as 5 high schools and roughly 200 students from one county has grown to be this year where they had 17 high schools participate from 5 counties, Henrico and North, to go to George Mason for the day. And part of what happened on that adventure in George Mason was specifically tailored to what would be interesting to them. So there was a capture the flag, capture the packet, but they also got to fly drones and got to see the things because we polled the students. Those teachers polled the students and asked them, what are things that are interesting to you? What types of things do you want to get into? And every student loved a drone. So they brought the drone group in, and I'm not kidding, there was 20 drones. Ones were as small as a Post-it stamp, all the way up to what looked like a smart car size, you know, the small electronic vehicles. And it was pretty incredible to watch them just get inspired and see those lights turn on for those students. And that isn't exclusive to one county or the other. So I'd like to find out which county you're from and get your teachers involved there to get those students. Because private partnerships have paid X amount of sums. I don't know, I'm not over the financial part of that. But they pay so they can bus these students. So there's no financial burden on the counties or on the students or on the teachers that are coming. Because they truly want it to be an environment where they don't have stress and they're able to actually come and enjoy it. And I don't know about any of you, but the first time I did Cyber Slam with them last year, it was at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning, and there was like 200 kids wired for sound. Like they were just lit up and excited. And I don't know where you were in 9th and 10th grade in high school, but I can tell you I was definitely not at my high school gymnasium at 9 o'clock in the morning wanting to hear people talk for hours. That was not my tribe. But it was pretty incredible. And we've had people, everybody from the CTO of TikTok, which is liked in some spaces and liked, or not liked in others. But the young folks that were there, the CTO taking the time to actually talk to them was a game changer. And the same thing with many businesses around the Commonwealth. It lights them up and they're excited because they matter. And that's how we beat that deficit, the 60,000 jobs deficit, is by truly encouraging people to left seat, right seat, and help these kids get inspired. And it'll help revitalize you, because there's nothing better. And I invite all of you to come out to George Mason in January next year, to come out and actually see it in action. Bring your businesses, bring your high school students, connect with me, and I'll get your county involved. Because there's nothing better than watching that light bulb for a kid. Because many of you might not remember what got you here. But watching somebody else get there is pretty impactful and inspiring to everyone to see. And the last thing I'll talk about is CCI. Is anyone in here aware of CCI? It's always one.
I'm a startup, so
Of course you know then.
I know about it.
So CCI is the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative. In just 2 years, they brought over $200 million of GDP to the state of Virginia. Just them. And you're like, well, who the heck are they? Well, they are essentially a conglomerate of 41 universities across the Commonwealth, specifically ours, that work together through nodes across. They have 5 different nodes across the Commonwealth. And they come together and they bring their students in, they bring startups in, and they help startups find people. They also help startups find money. And they help create that cycle of continuously finding people, training people, moving them through. But I'm working with them right now on a project in Southwest Virginia, I kind of mentioned with the agricultural space, because it is a Homeland Security issue. Food sustainability is a Homeland Security issue. But working to help our farmers be as competitive as some of those other states that have unlimited resources, the perfect temperature year-round, and have soil that is much easier than ours. You know, they came to me and asked me to write on it, and I laughed because I'm not a PhD. I'm an MBA, but not a PhD. And everyone else is a PhD. And when they came to me, they brought it to me, they explained to me what brought it on. And the biggest case that they had was that they thought there was going to be a popcorn shortage during the pandemic. Did anybody know about that? I didn't know that was a thing. But it was. And their way to fix the popcorn shortage, these farmers got together, and because they didn't have the manure that they needed, they didn't have the stuff that they needed, and so they went to all the chicken farmers in Virginia and paid for their chicken litter. If you don't know what that is, you're gonna have to Google it. But they went after that because they're finding a way to get to yes and actually stop the popcorn shortage. But it got these researchers like myself thinking, what can we do to challenge further? Who can we invite to the table? Who can we talk to help these family farms who could have been crippled if they lost their entire supply? What can we do to help that never happen in the future? And it came down to a ton of PhDs, me, and now some private industry partners to be able to help us get those products to launch. And it's incredible things that are happening and incredible things to watch. Maybe. And I talked a little bit about the cyber range. And I would be interested to know if the gentleman here in the back, if his county actually uses the cyber range. And if not, we'll get them connected to Mr. Raymond. But if you don't, if you have a student in Loudoun County Public Schools, Lee County Public Schools, wherever, your students have the ability to have access, and so do your teachers. And it's as easy as contacting the Virginia Cyber Range. And it will allow them to be able to learn their gamification style, to be able to actually have an impact on their skill set without breaking anything in your home or others. Which I have been told by many counties, please God, do not let them break into anything that they cannot fix. Now, legislation. Cyber legislation is always hard because you never want to put something into code that's going to constantly change. And cyber's constantly changing. But what we do know is what will be static and what will be consistent is the fact that we don't know all of the cyber incidents that are happening around us. Well, currently there's nothing in code, and I don't think that there's an appetite to put private industry in code to provide what happens in their businesses specifically. There is the appetite to have all of the local entities, whether it be a county, a municipality, a school, et cetera, to report their incidents within 24 hours. And again, that's where they would just raise their hand and let us know what's going on. So we can start helping and providing resources at a much faster rate. And that'll be a huge game changer once people start adopting into it. It's been a very slow process to roll it out, mostly because the General Assembly didn't fully define what cyber incident meant. Don't laugh too hard, because when you try to explain to someone who has absolutely no idea what that means, it is a challenge. And when they ask you for definitions that the General Assembly did not provide, it becomes even harder, because then people got real sassy and sent us every time someone's password was taken. Have you seen how many people were on a college campus? Then you know how many reports we can get. But that's what makes this legislation a game changer, because it starts pushing us to have that discussion. This is something that is static, it will stay. It needs a little bit of work, and I think that's something we can work on in this next session to really kind of hone in of what the expectation is for incident response. And last but certainly not least, for those of you who do not know where to report in the Commonwealth specifically a cyber incident, it is to the Virginia Fusion Center. And currently, on both screens, you can see where exactly, I believe the website, if it's not on there, I can get it to you if you need it. But we specifically need more reporting. The more that we know, the more we can understand exactly where the next iteration is going to take us, where we should be putting resources to. Because if we're putting resources to something that's really not being targeted, it's really not going to be an impact, it's going to be a waste of taxpayer dollars. So it's a full discussion and conversation, and it's a very quick form. It takes, I think, 1.5 minutes if you write slow to fill out the form. And if you're not comfortable because in a cyber incident you might be compromised on your email system, or maybe your entire system's locked out, there's a phone number that we can also provide you. So there's lots of ways to get to yes. All right. So at this point, I'm going to take some questions if you have them. And please don't get offended if I have to actually get back to you on some of them. I will get back to you, but I don't want to give you bad gouge. So Go for it.
Are you looking for outsiders to help with the definition of what is a cybercrime on those?
I wouldn't turn away from it. I think with this legislative session that we're going to need a lot of input when it comes to how we can better that legislation and really get something sustainable from it. Because right now the way that it's currently written, there's no requirement of what you do once you have that. And so I'd like to expand the code to say this is what we would like to see on the backside of it, because I think if the localities actually get something from it, they'll be more likely to participate, if that makes sense.
I think like the gentleman in the back, I was going to send you an email, or maybe you know, what are some additional resources like checking out the bot for like the elementary school examples from programming?
Mm-hmm.
I know a couple slides back, I forget what it was called, but that sandbox that you had,
Mm-hmm.
what was it called? The cyber range, and then who would be like a good point of contact to like check out the bots for the kid programming? Okay.
Because I've been in contact with everybody, I'm probably the easiest person to reach out to. And then you don't have to go through a bunch of different people to get to me.
And I'm in Rifle County.
So I think you guys were supposed to attend, and there was a frost. Like you guys had some kind of weird freeze. And so that one high school from Henrico couldn't come because the buses couldn't get, like the diesel, it was weird. It was like a diesel thing that happened because they were supposed to leave at like 5 in the morning. And they couldn't warm the bus up because they even canceled Henrico schools that day. But I'm aggressively targeting Henrico to get them involved.
Hey, thanks for your presentation. I'm curious about what the big 3 cloud service providers are doing with the Commonwealth as their largest data centers are at our back door.
And growing, $35 billion from AWS. So as far as doing with us, it's a very loaded question.
Okay.
So what are they doing with the localities? Because localities have their own impact. Loudoun County, where AWS is largely at with that whole data row into Fairfax, they're doing some unique things with them. But as far as with the Commonwealth at large, if they're not under our current contract, there isn't necessarily something that goes along with it. However, the majority of what we've done specifically with AWS and Google, we've worked with them as they've come in for things like the certificate systems. We've worked with the incentives that they're able to provide back to the students and to the localities in order to get more people trained and get to that ability. But as far as specifically providing security, they have to provide for themselves. But the interconnectability, it's there with us having discussions, but it's not going to ever be open kimono. Private industry doesn't have that same appetite that I would like them to, and I get it. But it would be nice, and I think that's one of the things that I'm working towards. In my previous life, I worked for the Director of National Intelligence, and we would get private industry to come in and talk about some of the threats that they had seen. And so it's something that I'm working towards, because I think that some of private industry would be more able to come forward and talk about the challenges, specifically the cloud providers, if it was something where they were able to come to the table and have a discussion. I don't know if they would ever be willing to have an open forum.
Just an idea, all 3 of them have what they call SLED,
Mm-hmm.
right, state local education. That might be an inroad, right, into having a conversation. Because a lot of them are Fed Intel, right, focused, but
The majority of them are Fed focused. Until they found out that we got money from the federal government, I didn't really hit on our funding that we received from the federal government. I'm sure you guys have heard how wonderful and large the amount of money is that we got. It isn't. We got about $20 million over 4 years. If you break that out to the 133 localities, I can buy pins that say, "Don't share my password." So that's where we're looking at, and I'm working on Capitol Hill. I go back there next week to talk about the language and the way that it's written, to be able to provide larger service items at cost at the state level to the localities that want to get involved with that, because it will give them more bang for their buck versus trying to itemize out 20,000 here, 30,000 here, 40,000 here, which you guys have purchased things, or your companies that do purchase things, it's not really going to go very far. And that's one of the big things that I don't think the legislators thought about. The purpose was to get 80% of that funding down to the local level, which is the most important part. And in many states, we're trying to push even more down to the local level. But we've got to find a way to be able to service them better than trying to give $20,000 that really will not do anything to Fairfax County.
A quick follow-on if I can.
Sure.
Being a disabled vet,
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing that a lot of those folks have a lot of time in their hands. And so any thoughts about targeting disabled vets as your potential social or cybersecurity?
Were you a plant?
Trust me, I'm not.
So I too am a disabled veteran, and so it's been my pet project recently, is trying to find ways to encourage, because Virginia has actually over 100,000 female veterans, which is not the same as disabled veterans, but looking at the veterans at large, right, and how we can better their educational pathway forward. And we have this thing called Virginia Ready, and that program has I think 17 different certificate programs to actually get people gainful employment, and it's paid through a partnership with the state. We work with that, but that was one of the recent things that I've spoken to, and I'm not exaggerating, it hasn't even been a week, because we were talking about it in celebration of the 75th year of women being in the military. Was talking about, okay, cool, good for them. What about the rest of us? What about the disabled ones? The ones that, for whatever reason, this might be a better career venture, because many of the folks that I've talked to specifically that are service disabled really don't want to work in an office environment and need to have a little bit more flexibility because of various diagnoses. Yeah. But that's why we're looking for more ways to get to yes. And so while it's been a misconception that the governor or the chief of staff was taking away those work from home capabilities, we were just trying to understand it. And so work from home is still available in the Commonwealth. It just has to go through an approval process. And for those specific circumstances, it can definitely be met. And so that's what we're looking at. But I literally asked our Veterans Department about it. I'm not kidding. I think that was Monday. Sure, I would like that. That's directly to me. Don't all send something at once.
I just want to say I think it's great that you are really trying to hit hard on the local school, the K-12 especially, because I came from a computer science background.
Mm-hmm.
And people have found that the best way going forward to address the massive issue of congregations of accreditation of large amounts of certain races or certain genders or ethnicities in that field is to go back to K-12 and ask, well, why are people shying away from these tracks? Why are people going less into IT and information security programming? And they think, well, if we just simply let the kids enjoy it at their own pace with their own two hands, they'll be more open to it. This is a great initiative towards that.
Absolutely, and I think you must be a plant too. You guys are in cahoots. Well, then we should probably talk about some other initiatives. So one of the big things that really hit home with me is I am really involved in the autism community. And one part that's really bothered me for a very long time is individuals with intellectual disabilities are looked at as if they can't do anything. And it's super troubling to me. And I spent a lot of time with the ARC of Northern Virginia, and I watch all these kids just want a chance, right? They want to be a normal kid, whatever normal means. And they want to be treated like everybody else. So it's been a pet project of mine to find ways to get the entire intellectual gamut involved. Because like you mentioned, 9th grade, we see an incredible drop-off with young girls. Like, I don't know if there's something in the water, or they just all tell their friends, cyber's not cool. I have no idea. But we're working really hard to engage. But to take that step even further for you, VUU, here in Richmond, they didn't have a cyber program. They're just building it now. And they're building it through private partnerships to try to really change the lives, like in a way that I don't think we'll ever be able to measure. Because you're not just changing one person's life in this community, because they're great paying jobs. You're changing families for the future. And so it's been a pet project of mine to make not only this the most diverse workforce, but also the intellectually diverse. And I think that the more that we look and we understand that this particular workforce has the ability to work from anywhere, to do very incredible things, it's going to be a Disney difference maker. It's going to change the narrative for the Commonwealth and across the country, but I really just care about the Commonwealth.
Also, in my college, I worked at a program that was looking at K-12
That would be great. Send them over to me. Again, not all at one time.
So along those lines, I mean, it sounds like there's some really good opportunities with the Cyber Slam and the Cyber Range and stuff like that. Is there, if I know a teacher that I'd like to urge to engage with this, is there a specific site portal or?
Listen, I'm one woman. I would kill to have a killer portal, but at this point, I'm a one-woman show. But if you have an educator that wants to know more, I will get them personally plugged in, because that's going to be kind of how we change in smaller areas. Because CyberSlam, literally, it's 5 teachers. 5 teachers that started that. They did over 1,000 hours of private time, no compensation. And then the county, when they got offered to go speak out in Arizona, the county gave them $100 and said they wouldn't pay for another dime. I just laughed. So now they're my pet project of trying to help them get what they need. Oh.
I just want to ask something related to that. What is the right, I don't know, grade range for that sort of thing? I feel like
I don't think there is a right grade range. So it just depends.
Rising 5th grader, I'm like, oh, I want her involved.
Yeah.
Do this stuff.
So my 4th grader is not tech savvy. I'm surprised he can turn his computer on. But they made it to where it was like he created a game system. And so it like triggered in with him where it made sense on his level. So like there's coding for kids, which is probably a little bit lower than a 5th grader. But let me think, and I'll let you know what they have. Is it boy or girl?
So that's a girl. I have 2 girls and a something.
They have coding for girls. It's a thing. We're trying to make it bigger in Virginia. But message me. I'll help you come up with some things.
That's fine.
I welcome the annoyance, I promise.
I came in a little late. Did you mention Code RVA, the high school that does programming, does coding?
I didn't specifically. I know that they're a governor school. I didn't specifically mention them because it's a little different of a process to get everyone in to that particular school. But I know that Danville also created something. Danville Community College has also created something not the same, but similar. We have those laid out, but I didn't put that in my presentation fully.
Didn't know if they were going to expand those across the state.
I think the intention is we want to have more of those schools, but it's a huge undertaking. I can't lie to you, it's a huge undertaking. And it's really getting those partnerships like we had talked about with private industry to really get involved and put those in places where we wouldn't inherently think they should be. They don't need to go to Fairfax and Loudoun for everything. They need to be throughout the Commonwealth. And so that's something we're looking at, but it's an incredibly heavy lift. But Danville did just do their own cyber lab, which is pretty cool for them to have, and I cut the ribbon on it last fall. It was pretty neat. All right, I think I have time for one more, and then I get the real, have you guys seen this? Has he showed you? I can't, I'm almost there. I got 45 seconds. I have to get this signed, so somebody has to ask a question. Are you for real? Somebody asked the question. I'm gonna call on someone who is a plant in here. That's longer than 45 seconds. I'm gonna start sounding like the pencil on Saved by the Bell, Everything keeps me up. The biggest thing is the lack of education on what cyber truly is and how to protect themselves across the Commonwealth. That's what I lose the most sleep about. Secondary is unfunded mandates from the General Assembly that have been put in long before me. So it really burdens them to where they go and look for third-party or fourth-party industry to come in. That can make our lives a lot harder because we don't know who everyone is.
You're welcome.
I made it. But I will take your question here. What you
I was going to ask what the most satisfying thing you've done in this position.
The most satisfying? Listen, I got to answer. That's a great question. The most satisfying piece that I've done is actually get some of these kids who have complained to me so much about not getting qualified experience. Fairfax County, I asked every county to pick up some high school students, to actually put them in a training program of some kind, to give them internships. I know. I didn't realize it was going to be a flashing sign. But they went from having a 2-month program to the students 2 weeks in asking the CIO of Fairfax to create a year-round program for them. So that's where we're seeing the difference because they're actually liking it. They love it, and that's the most impactful part for me. Thank you, everybody.